Okay, so yesterday we started the first part of 2.5, which is solving higher order polynomial functions. So today we're going to continue on with that. We're going to finish up the section. So this is just 2.5 continued. I'm going to call it day 2. Okay, so yesterday we talked about finding rational zeros and how to find possibilities of rational zeros. Today we're going to talk about finding all of the zeros. So our keyword today is going to be finding all. So we're going to include ones that have, like have your integers still. But now we're going to include square roots and we're going to include imaginary numbers. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to be given a zero and we're going to find all of the zeros. So we already know that this is one answer. And I know we're going to have 3 answers total because this is an x to the third. So I know I need to find 2 more answers. So what we're going to do is we're going to do synthetic division with this 0. So we're going to start off with this 0. So I'm going to list all my coefficients. So 2, 3, 50, 75. Remember, if anything's missing, you have to put a 0 in there. Okay, so I'm going to bring down the first one. Then I'm going to multiply. So 5i times 2 is 10i. Okay, now I can add these together, but I can't really actually combine them. So this would be 3 plus 10i. Okay, this is where it starts getting a little complicated. So I'm going to write my work down here. So then I'm going to take 5i times 3 plus 10i. Well, when I distribute this, then I get 15i plus 50i squared. And since we know I squared is negative 1, this is really negative 50. So in here I get negative 50 plus 15i. Okay, then I add down, I'm left with 15i. And then I'm going to multiply. So 5i times 15i is 75i squared. And since I know I squared is negative 1, this is negative 75. My remainder is 0. If you do not get a remainder of 0, then you've done something wrong. Okay, so I've done synthetic to once. Then I'm going to do synthetic division with the other 0 that I know is true. Well, in order to get an I, you had to do a square root. And any time you solve doing a square root, you need to have a positive and a negative. So I automatically know that another one of my answers is negative 5i. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take negative 5i, I'm going to do synthetic division, but I'm not going to go back to the beginning. I'm going to take these numbers that I just used. So I would have 2, 3 plus 10i, and 15i. Okay, so I'm going to bring down my first number, multiply, so I get negative 10i, add down, I get 3, multiply, I get negative 15i, add down, I get 0. Once again, if you do not get 0 for your remainder, you've done something wrong. Okay, so what I'm left with, now I can put it into an equation and finish solving. So I start with x cubed. I divided once to get x squared. When I divide again, I'm now at x. So this would be 2x plus 3. And then I set that equal to 0, and I solve. So I subtract 3, divide by 2, so I have negative 3 over 2. So my answers, I had the 5i that I was given. I also knew negative 5i. And then my third answer is negative 3 over 2. I'm going to take all of my answers and then they put them in a solution set. So we're going to do one more of these. Okay, so I know one of my answers is negative 3 plus I. So I'm going to do synthetic division with negative 3 plus I. So that goes on the outside. List your coefficients. So I bring down the first one. I'm going to bring down the 4. And I'm going to multiply. Well, since I have two parts, I got to distribute. So this would be negative 12 plus 4I. So when I add down, my real parts match up. So I would be at 11 plus 4I. Okay, now I'm multiplying these together. I'm going to do my work here because it's going to have to multiply it out and simplify. So if I distribute those, I would have negative 33, then I would have minus 12I, then I would have plus 11I, then I would have plus 4I squared, okay, or 4I squared, this is I squared is negative 1, that'll be negative 4. So this would become negative 37. I combine those together, that's a minus I. Okay, when I add down 34 and negative 37 would be negative 3. And I have a minus I. So I'm going to multiply those two together. Same thing, you're going to have to distribute. So I would get 9 plus 3I minus 3I minus I squared. So this really becomes 1 is a negative negative, so this would really, those cancel. So that's 10, my remainder is 0. And if your remainder is not 0, you know you've done something wrong. Okay, so I know this is one of my answers. Then I also know another answer has to be negative 3 minus I. Okay, and how I know to change the I. That is the part that you got the square root from. So when you take the square root of a negative, the square root is what needs the plus and minus. So the I part is what you change. The real part doesn't change. The real part stays the same. So now I'm going to take my new coefficients. So 4, 11 plus 4I, and negative 3 minus I. And I'm going to do synthetic division. So I bring down my 4, multiply, I would have negative 12 minus 4I. Add down, I get negative 1. Multiply, I get 3 plus I. Add down, I get 0. If you don't get 0, it's wrong. Okay, you've done something wrong along the way. I'm not saying you have the wrong numbers here, but somewhere along the way you messed up. So I start with cubes. I divided once to get squared, once to get x. So I am left with 4x minus 1. If I set that equal to 0 and solve, I would add 1, divide by 4, So then my answers are, oh, down here. -3 plus I, -3 minus I, and 1/4. Okay. Now the second part is we're actually going to find all the zeros, but we're not going to be given one to start with. So this is the whole, that's the whole shebang, the whole thing, putting it all together. Okay, and when you're finding all the zeros, if you can factor, just factor, because it saves yourself a lot of time. It makes it a lot more easier on you and the time and how long it takes. So like x to the 4th minus 81, this one factors into x squared plus 9, x squared minus 9. Excuse me. Then I would set each part equal to 0. And I would solve. So on the x squared plus 9, I would subtract 9. Then I would take the square root. So I know anytime you're solving and you take the square root, you need plus or minus. Square root of 9 is 3. Since a negative, you'll have an I. Solving the other part, I'm going to add 9. And then I take the square root. So I have plus or minus. Square root of 9 is 3. I have an x to the 4, so that means I should have 4 answers. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I have plus or minus 3i and plus or minus 3. The order does not matter. Since you have multiple answers, make sure you use solution sets. Okay, if you have a quadratic and the quadratic doesn't factor, then you're going to do the quadratic formula. So this one doesn't factor, nothing multiplies to give you 2 and adds to get -2. So I would do the quadratic formula. So we don't even do synthetic division until you get to cubed or 4th powers or 5th powers, etc. Okay, factoring, if it'll factor, squares that don't factor, you do quadratic formula. So I would have 2 plus or minus the square root of -2 squared minus 4 times 1 times 2 all over 2 times 1. So inside my square root I have 4 minus 8, which is -4. So I have 2 plus or minus the square root of -4 over 2. Square root of -4 is 2i. So I have 2 plus or minus 2i over 2. And then 2 goes into everything, so I'd have 1. Don't forget that. 2 goes into 2 one time. Plus or minus I. Okay, so now we're going to do a cube. So now we're going to have to use synthetic division. Okay, so the first thing I have to do is find the possibilities. So I'm going to do the factors of 10 divided by the factors of 1, so it's really just the factors of 10. And I need to find a number that makes it 0. So I'm going to start with 1, and I'm going to plug 1 in for x, and I'm going to see if that gives me 0. So 1 minus 6 plus 13 minus 10 is negative 2. That doesn't give me 0, so I know 1 is not an answer. So then I would try negative 1. Well, when I put in negative 1, I would get negative 1 minus 6 minus 13 minus 10, which is negative 30. That's not an answer either. So then I go to my next number. I'm going to try 2. So I plug in 2, I would get 8 minus 24 plus 26 minus 10, which is 0. So this is my first answer. I need to have 3 total because it's an x to the third. So I found my first one, so this is the one we're going to do synthetic division with. And remember, once you get it down to a squared, you're either going to factor or quadratic formula. So I bring down the 1, multiply, add down, multiply, add down, multiply, add down. So I'm left with x, I started with x cubed, divided once, now we're x squared, minus 4x plus 5. Okay, multiply to get 5, add to get negative 4. Nothing works, so I would have to do the quadratic formula. So I'd have 4 plus or minus square root of negative 4 squared minus 4 times 1 times 5 all over 2 times 1. So that would give me 16 minus 20, which is negative 4. And square root of negative 4 is 2i. And then those are all divided by 2, so this would be 2 plus or minus I. Okay, so I have that answer, but I also, don't forget, you have the other answer that you found at the beginning, which was 2. Okay, so my last one. So 5 terms, won't factor by grouping. So I gotta do my possibilities. So I'll do factors of 16 divided by factors of 1. Okay, and I find one that works. So I'm gonna try 1 first. And when I plug in 1, that would be 1 minus 4 plus 8 minus 16 plus 16, which is 5. That doesn't work. So then I'm going to plug in negative 1. When I plug in negative 1, I have 1 plus 4 plus 8 plus 16 plus 16, which is 45. That one doesn't work. So then I would try 2. So then I'd have 16 minus 32 plus 32 minus 32 plus 16, which is 64. Make sure I did that right. Okay, actually that gives you 0. I added when I should have subtracted. So 2 is our first answer. So I'm going to do synthetic division with 2. So I bring down the first number, multiply, add down, multiply, add down, multiply, add down, multiply, add down. So I start with x to the 4th, so now we're at x cubed. Okay, when you get to this point, if it'll factor, factor. If it doesn't, then you gotta find another 0 and do synthetic division again. So this one factors. So I factor out x squared, x minus 2, factor out of 4, I have x minus 2. So this is x minus 2, x squared plus 4. And then I set it equal to 0 and solve. So I get x equals 2. So I get 2 as an answer twice. Okay, if you don't have to write it twice, you write it once in your solution sets, but it's actually a double 0. On x squared plus 4, I would subtract 4, and then I would do the square root. For square root, you have plus or minus, and the square root of negative 4 is 2i. So my answers are 2, and if you want to write it twice, you can, and then plus or minus 2i. Okay, this one I'll get you through the rest of the assignment on page 179.